Hi, everyone.
I like your fedora.
You like my what?
Your hat.
Oh, isn't that cool? I know, right? Keeps that big head underneath it. Now that there's no more hair up there.
It's like your signature look. You always have one on.
Yeah, I know, right? I really appreciate you noticed that. Yeah, I know, right? Since I don't have hair on top. But I tell you, it's very liberating not having hair on top. It's like, I mean, I hit my head and it's cold when it's cold outside, so you need a beanie. But when I work on people and I'm sweating and it's hot, it's really great. You know,
my wrestling coach in high school was bald, and when he sweat, he just sweat all over us.
Oh, that's funny.
I got him like one of those headband sweatbands because I was like, I can't have you. This isn't working for me.
Oh, that's too funny. when I work, sometimes I have to really push hard with my fingers onto people's bodies and keep rubbing, and this is like for hours. And I need to make it so it's comfortable for them, not for me. I have towels under my shirt and around my neck so it can absorb everything. But you know, that's probably a little bit TMI. Who knows, right?
That was fine. I felt fine for me.
No, it's funny. I mean, it's interesting. You know, this whole thing. I never thought it would be like that where I, work on people, but it's such a physical job actually at the end of the day. Anyway, how are you guys doing in terms of all the material we're working on?
I like learning all about it. I'm a little bit nervous for like retention, but I also know that the test is open book, which makes me feel less nervous.
Yeah, I've always been so concerned about my retention on these things, and it's very interesting you bring that up because I've been working as a body worker. It's really not a chiropractic; it's more body all that together for a long time, and so I learned this material. I first started as an apprentice in an insurance company, and then I came to America, and then I went to the school system. And so it was always like this learning and memorizing and things. And I always felt like I came from behind. You know, I wasn't like, I didn't know the language and all that at first. And then I got into practice and I started working, and people thought I was good. And, and I ended up working on people like the Raider people or some Raider footballers, or the Christian McCaffrey from Stanford I worked on, or one of the guys Antonio Brown, who just got a touchdown, although he's a total asshole, but that's a different story, and I came from this place of like being worried that I don't remember shit, right? But I realized this is material that at the end you need to be able to look it up. You don't need to remember it all. And it's like an onion layer. You learn it once. I learned it once and I forgot half of it, and I thought, oh my God, I'm not good enough. But it doesn't matter. It's not what it's about. And so then all these doctors, they think, like I know with the chiropractors, they feel like they need to know it all from memory. But what happens then clinically is they forget half the time what's going on because they don't give themselves the room to look it up, to be like, oh, I don't remember. So if you worry about retention, I would put that aside. And yes, it's an open book test. And so that's why for me, it's much more important that you learn how to use these materials and you have them as reference points. And so when you look at the test, it's much more important for me when you don't feel like you're a cheater or anything if you look it up. For me, it's much more important that you know how to look it up and apply it.
Thank you.
Right? Oh, absolutely. No, it drives me. These academic people drive me nuts. I don't like it. So I'm a little feisty about it. And so I'm trying to be, because it's got to be really applicable. And medicine is in many ways fairly mediocre because we have to apply it to so many people. But I really believe it's very important, therefore even more important for all of us to understand as much as we can about our bodies that we can make better medical decisions. So that's really key. Anyway, I'm feisty today. I had my first class for Merced College at 3:00 today. So I'm already fired up with everything. But I wanted to ask you guys, have you any questions? No? Everything is pretty smooth?
I'm doing good.
Good. I've been a little behind on the grading. I'll be catching up. I try to be fairly caught up with the material that we're just working on today, but I know I have to catch up. I like 60 of you that I haven't graded this week, so I'll be doing that coming up today and tomorrow. Well, probably tomorrow, actually. So that's good. So if you guys don't have questions, and again, if you feel, if you need, if you have a question, just interrupt me. That way we don't have an empty screen going and I just keep asking you. So, but I need to know that you will just interrupt me if you have a question, please. That way I don't feel bad. So I want to go through the terms of the term list number 1, which, where the heck did I put my term list number 1? Hold on. So I want to talk about axial skeleton as well as axial musculature and then the upper body muscles. So we're moving right along here. This is sort of the stuff I like the most. Can you see my muscles?
Yes.
Good. And where the heck did I have my term list? What's wrong with me? There we go. Okay, good. So when we look at the muscles of the trunk, when we look at the muscles of the trunk, we look at the muscles. I look at the muscles. I talked about it when I talked about the bones. I talked about the shoulder blade, the scapula. That sort of, you can see it underneath here, that goes up on the rib cage right in here, and then the clavicle, and then the arm bone comes out of it, the humerus. And I make sure you're on mute. And then I talked about when it comes to the muscles that we're going to look at the muscles that attach to the shoulder blade, and then the muscles that attach the arm into the shoulder blade. So actually, I say in the clinic with my patients, I say the muscles that anchor the shoulder blade to the trunk, I want to talk about, and or look at if there is an issue with those muscles when they have a pain, and then look at the muscles that attach the arm into the shoulder blade, if there is a problem with that, because very often there is. And then I want to, from a muscle perspective, when I look at clinically, and again, this is how I do it in clinic. I look at the bony alignments and all of that, how that fits together, and then I look at which muscles work either too much or too little. What is the misbalance, the imbalance in there? And so that's how I want to teach it to you guys. And then so the third group of muscles I look at is who moves the arm around, or the humerus, and then further on we go who moves the elbow around, and then the forearm around. And so that's the grouping of muscles. In your booklets, and I texted it to you at some point, in your booklets on the last page of booklet 2 and booklet, here are my booklets, booklet 2 and booklet 3, you have these things here, these barcodes, and these barcodes link to cadaver videos, and these link to a couple of other pictures. The first one is a muscle chart. If you go to that gives you a PDF of the groupings of all the muscles with all the attachments and all the actions in a sort of a table format. So it's on 3 pages, all the upper and lower extremities. So it is an overview. I think that I did that for Bio 2 class, an upper vision anatomy class at some point, and I think it's very useful. Well, I'm touting my own horn, so maybe you think, who knows? We'll see. You'll let me know. And then this is cool. If you do flashcards, this middle one is a document that has all the muscles that you can cut them out, and then you can label them, or you just print it and then you label them to practice as practice test. And then this last one is my own personal muscle picture that I did for an electronic device where I put all the muscles on one page, and I include the small hand muscles on there in a way that you can visualize them. So that's, it's just, again, another tool to study for the test. If you go if you want it on an electronic device. So that's why I put it up there. And then these upper ones, the muscle cadaver videos, is probably about 30 or 40 little small clips of maybe a minute to 3 minutes or 4 minutes of a muscle description on a cadaver. And so that might be helpful if you're a visual person, and you don't worry about looking at a cadaver, but you're looking at muscle. It's not the whole thing. So that I did that for my own studies when I started some muscle technique, and I figured it might be interesting for some of you. So I wanted to put it up there as well for you guys to just access that. And then the other thing, of course, as I mentioned before, if you want, since we're working on enhancing our studies, if you want to, I'm actually not on the, hold on. I'm not on Canvas in your class, but I'm Canvas in the other class. So let's just do the other class. I've under modules on the student orientation, the first one, I linked the anatomy atlases, which are picture books of anatomy pictures. For example, when you look at this first one, this is well, actually, this is a really good book. It's an anatomy book. It's like 700 friggin' pages long, but it doesn't matter because you're not reading a lot. You're basically looking at pictures of the brain or something, and everything is labeled. Every little detail is labeled. So we learned some of those labels, but not all of those labels. But here you have a book that shows all of those labels. And so I think it's really good to have at least one of those. And this way you get it for free on your iPad or whatever phone or tablet, computer thing. In the background, you can just upload it and it's a PDF. So I think that's another really good resource that I urge you guys to look into. And that is accessible on the first module, wherever that was. Here under the module 1, links to anatomy atlases. Okay, good. So that's, since we're talking about those resources, let me take roll after that here. If you have questions, just interrupt me. I got Jamuna. Give me a live sign that you're there. I got Tenaya. I got Lexi.
Yeah.
Good. Sarah.
Yep. Here.
Nelia.
Lexi here.
Caitlin.
Here. Here.
I got Koa.
Here.
Kyla May.
Here.
I got Vannery.
Here.
Evan.
I'm here.
Hello. Good to hear you.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. Don't worry about it. I understand. I got Brianna.
Here.
Oh, excellent. So we'll have people come back on if they do, but let's go back to the term list. So I want you guys to turn out the term list. And so again, remembering that the muscles, I go with groups. And so the first group we want to look at on the trunk muscle is sort of who works with the scapula, who works with the shoulder blade. This is a little big. Can you see it? The head and neck movers?
Yep.
Good. So the first one I got on the list is the trapezius muscle. And the trapezius muscle is very interesting. You got down here, you got origin. That's where the muscle attaches. That's sort of the part of the attachment that don't move. So this whole line here is the origin of the trapezius muscle. And you're not going to move the spine with the trapezius muscle. The force exertion is much more going from the center here out to the shoulder blade, as the trapezius is attached to the shoulder blade on the spine of the scapula, going around the acromion, and then actually coming to the front and all the way going to here. You see this person here. This is all trapezius still. See trapezius. This so it's like wrapping around this shoulder, and then it does all these kind of motions on the shoulder blade. It does do motion on the neck, but it does not. It's much more stable in this this attachment to the bone is much more stable. So that's what we're going to call the origin down in here. See, O is origin. Yes.
Sorry. Is this the topmost muscle in this area? Like, is it over the other muscles or?
Yes, it's the most superficial.
Superficial. Okay.
Yes, so they call, yes, deep and superficial is sort of in the muscle, the layers, right? It's all layered. And what I find it interesting is when I learn it over time is the top layers generally move the things more around, bigger movements, and the deeper layer becomes smaller movers or stabilizers or postural muscles or so forth.
Thank you.
Oh, that's a very good question. And so, yeah, when you touch, you grab the top here, that's trapezius right there, right up here. That's trapezius muscle. And then when you go on the shoulder blade and you go right where the angle is right in here and you rub that, and that's a little iffy, and you feel that be a little painy, that will be more a deeper muscle then, and that's the levator scapula muscle. And so we'll get to that. Yeah, please ask me. Well, ask me all those questions. I'll go for hours. So when you look here, origin is the spine here, cervical spine, thoracic spine, all the way down to T12. So further down than what it depicts. And then also the EOP. That's why I have that as a question or as a landmark I want you to know. And then it goes on the spine of the scapula, about a third here, and then acromion, and then the front of the clavicle a little bit. That's the insertion. And then the action, in the video, I hope I talk enough about the action. But generally, what you want to figure out is when you look at action, some things are, the shoulder blade is really hard to figure out how it moves because it's got these different axes of motion, and then it's got all these muscles. So you just kind of have to see it and learn it. But in general, you can really think, what happens when these fibers contract? What happens when this and this get closer together? Well, I guess what? This shoulder blade probably move upward a little bit, so the arm might move out a little bit. So that's sort of, those are the things you want to look at. And most muscles, if you do that visualization, you can sort of figure out what the action is. All right, so after that, I like to go to the, actually, I don't think I have levator scapula on this, so let me go to that real quick since I talked about it. Where is that thing?
I think it was on the previous chapter, maybe.
Oh, was it? Okay. Well, the levator scapula. Oh, what do we talk about here? At least I see it. The levator scapula is attached here and goes all the way up to actually C1 to C4, the cervical spine. So often, what I see clinically, I see people who have shoulder things, and they go up and become neck pains. And so look at the pain here. Look at the pain pattern. The red is the pain pattern. No, that's the trapezius pain pattern. Never mind. I don't know exactly what the levator pain pattern is. I have to look it up.
The levator scapula is in the upper extremities parts. So it's in your neck bit.
Thank you. Let's just go to that while we're at it, since we mentioned it. And I feel the trapezius and the levator were closer together, clinically speaking. I give you all these clinical things that if you're a massage therapist, you can apply them. See, here's the levator scapula. See, the attachment is there, top of the shoulder blade going all the way up to the neck, top neck. This is the pain pattern of it. So a lot of people, actually, I get pain coming in my neck. And guess what? You're holding your phone on your neck and you're like doing this weird thing. This muscle is going to be contracted. If you do that too long, this muscle is going to be, I don't like it. Muscles are like animals. You got to treat them well. Otherwise, they're going to rebel. Actually, they're like worse than animals. They're really going to rebel. They don't have that, like, you can't put the fear into them. They just talk back to you. This muscle is a very big muscle, and I often call it my boss is mad at me muscle because you pull up your shoulders a little bit. So that's a very interesting one. So that's deeper than the trapezius was, and the trapezius here moves this shoulder blade around quite a bit. the levator scapula kind of like anchors it and holds it in. So that's almost becomes more of a postural muscle. It will pull on the neck also a little, but it really holds that shoulder blade up. That's its main job. That makes sense?
Yep.
Yes.
Good. If I'm too boring, just call me out. It's okay. I can hear it. I've been married a few times. Don't worry. That wasn't a nasty joke. That means my butt hurtness is not that great. So then we have the sternocleidomastoid on the list. And the sternocleidomastoid is a very interesting muscle because, well, let's go back to the trapezius. The trapezius is named after its shape. A trapeze is the shape. So that's the geometric figure. If you had geometry. And the sternocleidomastoid is named after its attachment. So it's named after the sternum, the clavicle, cleido, and the mastoid process, mastoid, right here. So this is the three attachments. And it's a superficial muscle, so it's going to move the head around. And you can see it, you can make it out on most people when you do this, and you can see it bulges up like that. And you can grab on some pictures of the celebrities, you can see that sticking out as well. So that's the most superficial muscle. So again, it moves the neck around a lot. It works on the head and it moves it around. It doesn't stabilize it from that, so to speak. One injury that's interesting is Rhineck. If this muscle can go into spasm, it often happens in, well, I don't know how often, but if it happens in kids mostly, is when the neck gets stuck in that position, because that's the position that the neck makes when that muscle contracts. So that's, with that pathology, you can see one of its actions. And then the next muscle that we have on the list is the scalene muscle. And the scalene muscle is named after scales of a fish. So sometimes, it's like you had to have a lot of wine to think it really means that. But it comes layered, like the scales in a fish come. And it has a posterior scale, middle scale, and anterior scale. And they all attach to the ribs, first and second rib, and then to the anterior portion sort of the transverse process of the vertebrae. So it's just the TP for us. And TP means transverse process, by the way. And so what's interesting about those muscles, they work on elevating the rib when we do a deep inhalation, but they do flex the necks and move the neck in different directions depending on which one is contracting. But what's very interesting about that is these nerves. The yellow thing here is nerves. We haven't talked about nerves yet, but nerves are the things that give you tingly fingers, for example. That's nerves energy. So it's electrical sort of energy. And this area, when somebody has I see that a lot, when you're really tight above your clavicle, right here above the clavicle, your muscles can squeeze so hard that they can squeeze those nerves, and that can create numbness in the hand for some people. And so that can be related to tight scalenes when people have numbness in the hand. And you look at the pattern again, the pain pattern goes all the way down to the thumb of the pinky, and here the front of the thumb as well.
So it looks like it. What muscle would it be to give you tingling fingers on your like ring and pinky? Because this one looks like it just impacts
the ring and the pinky is more related I find it more related with the elbow. It's more the ulnar nerve.
Okay.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. So I find clinically I find that more be associated with the elbow. But I would still go, because this is only the pattern of the muscle spasm, so to speak, that creates that pain pattern. I also find a lot of things with the rib cage and the bony alignment, because your arm is attached to the shoulder blade and then to the rib cage. And let's just think about an excessive emotion or effort when you have a car accident, you're holding the steering wheel and you're falling forward and the arms go back and the chest goes forward. What gets a lot of tension is these ribs, and that's whiplash, from the rib perspective. The neck is even a different story on the whiplash. And when these joints are disrupted, these muscles get tight, and then we get generally numbness in the fingers also. And so that's another interesting So again, clinically, I find musculoskeletally speaking, you know, it's a matter, is it the muscle that does some weird stuff with a nerve, or is it a bony component? Does that make sense?
Yep.
So then from there, we can actually talk about that real quick. We have the muscles that are not on your list, but they're right laying on the top of the front of the neck, the longest coli muscles. And those are the ones that get really injured if you and that's why I bring them up. If you have a whiplash, if you have an injury where your neck falls, you know, your neck, you know, you're in a car and you get hit from behind and you're sort of driving and all of a sudden your neck goes back like that onto the headrest and then forward again because you get slammed. And the muscles that get tortured really heavily by that is the longest coli, these muscles in the front of the neck, and they get sort of ripped or at least strained. Strain means a muscle overstretching. A sprain, SP, means when the ligaments overstretch. And so I often clinically find that I have to work on these muscles to help with people that have whiplash injuries. And that really helps. What you can do to prevent that is you can make sure your head is on the headrest when you drive, because then when you, if in case you would get hit, your head is already at the headrest and it's not going to slam backwards. So that's one of the things, but it's really hard to do that. Try it out. When I drive, I try to do it, but it's really hard to remember. So that's the longest coli. Again, you don't need to worry about remembering the name, but I want you to remember the, you know, the importance of it for your own life. Then we have the suboccipital triangle. Again, that's more of a, I lectured on that. That's a very interesting muscle group, but it's very deep. So Sarah, look at this. This is interesting. You got the, this is the trapezius, most superficial, or everybody, of course. Then here's the next layer, right? On the occiput area. That's the splenius semispinalis. Again, we don't study those muscles from a memorization perspective. There's just a lot of them there, but they both move the neck around. The splenius and the semispinalis. You see the semispinalis here goes sort of in some ways down, up and down, but from the midline-ish to the more transverse process, a little lateral. So a little bit like that. And then the splenius definitely goes from the inside medial to the outside. So it's almost like a slight amount of a cross. And so that gives us a lot of mobility for the neck in that second layer. So, you know, that's probably the, if you know that about those muscles, you're really in good shape, because it took me about 10 or so years to learn about that, of those muscles. And then below that, we have the suboccipital triangle. And so that's the triangle that they're talking about. And that has a couple of muscles, these small little muscles here that go up and down deep, deep, deep. And then it's got one here and one here. And these are called the obliques right in here, the oblique. So the rectus capitis and the obliquus capitis. And again, you don't need to memorize those muscles, but they have a lot to do with your eyes. So if the eyes are alert and all that, these muscles are alert and all that. And then the other thing is then they are attached to the back fascia. And fascia is sort of a thick, fibrous, tendony or ligamenty structure that goes through the whole body and has patterns. And like you feel a fascia working when you step up a curb and you miscalculate the step and it sort of hits before you think it hits, and it sort of jerks you up the side of the back. I don't know if you have felt that. I'm a little klutzy, so I felt that sometimes. And so that's when the fascia contracts. So that's fascia. And there's one major fascia that goes from the front of the head all the way above on the scalp, down the neck, down the back, down the butt, down the back of the thigh, all the way to the sole of the feet. It's called the back fascia, and that's a really important one. And that is controlled in some ways by these muscles, and they pull on that fascia and they orient it. So it's very interesting stuff. But again, not memorizable, but more like, wow, this is some good stuff. That's what I want you to take out of that. But then what is on the list is the erector spinae. And the erector spinae are back muscles that are superficial back muscles. So these are interesting. Those are the back muscles that move the back around, move the back to the right or to the left or a little bit backwards. Those are also interesting because those muscles, when you go forward about 45 degrees, those muscles turn off. And so that's one reason why being forward like that for a long time and not moving out of your back and not out of your hip when you flex forward. You know, when you flex forward, you're supposed to move out of your hip, right? This is how you should go down, not this way. If you go down this way too much, these muscles, they stop functioning. And then you're just riding what, so to speak, you're held up by different ligaments and fascia, what we just talked about. And that's, you know, that wears you out. And that's when you go gardening and you come back after a few hours, you go like, oh, my back really hurts. That's why, if that's the case. Anyway, we have 3 erector spinae. We have 3 different one of them. We have Iliocostalis, Longissimus, Spinalis. The way that they're named is the way I remember. Ilio is hip, costalis means rib. These are the ribs. So this muscle goes to the ribs, iliocostalis. Longissimus goes from the hip all the way up to the transverse processes mostly. So to me, that's just the longest muscle. And then the spinalis goes to the spinous process of the spine from the hip. And that's why spinalis. You don't need to know. You don't need to memorize those, but I want you to know why. Because if you go to a higher level class and they don't really tell you necessarily what the naming is from, I want you to have an anchor so you remember that or can learn it easily. The multifidus is actually one of my favorite muscles, but it's not on the list because it's the D muscle in the lumbar spine. Actually goes all the way up. It's not just the lumbar spine, but the lumbar spine is where it becomes critical for back pain because we have found clinically and orthopedic literature, that's the medical doctor people, you know, the surgery people literature, that if the multifidus muscle, if you have back pain ever in your life, the multifidus muscle, which is here seen in white and here seen in dark, that multifidus muscle becomes wimpy and weak and is not functioning well, and that perpetuates low back pain and makes it cyclical, so it comes back all the time, or, you know, cyclical once a year. But the problem with that is, you know, if you're 20 of back pain and then it goes away and then 5 years later you have another episode of back pain, the problem is when you're 50, you might have a harder back pain episode that lasts longer if you didn't do anything about it. And that's why I'm talking about it, because I want you at least to know about it. So this darkness, it means the muscle is functioning. The muscle is muscle tissue. White indicates the muscle is fatty. So that's atrophy. So that means the muscle is not working. Fatty tissue is not that they're not fat. That just means it's not functioning. It's cheaper for maintaining a fatty tissue than a muscle tissue. Muscle tissue uses a lot of ATP, the energy molecule. And the stronger and the more firm that this multifidus muscle is, the more stable a low back will be, because these muscles really stabilize. They go from a transverse process or a mammillary process, which is kind of where the transverse is more or less a little medial on the lumbar spine, all the way up to the next spinous process. And so they're stabilizing these segments and they're moving the spine on a segmental level. So that's very interesting. I had a client and he was one of the Raider players, and I saw him in February for a shoulder injury. It was very interesting. It was early on in my career, so I was really like nervous and all that. And his lumbar down in here by the sacrum, it was kind of flat. And then I saw him again in April, I think, or probably March or so. But he started training for the spring training, and this become like an inch thick in here. So it was very, very interesting. And a youngster, he was, I think, 23 or 24 when I saw him, how fast that grew. It was very interesting. And so, you know, to stabilize it, you can do these kind of exercises, you know, contracting it, like in a Superman pose, they call that. Anyway.
So those exercises are not to stretch it, but to strengthen it. Are there also things like if you get back pain, like potentially from that you should do to stretch it?
if I have back pain quite a bit, or actually, no, it's not that much because I developed some tools for myself. So in your notes, in your handouts, let me go to that real quick. Because when you have an episode of back pain, I'm interested in stretching, in strengthening, and in mobilization. Not just stretching. And I have to go through this class's modules because I haven't been, I think it's in your, not the posture analysis, but I think it's in the home office one. In the home office handout, can you see my stuff?
Yep.
So you can maneuver the same thing, right? In that handout, at the end, I have these exercises. And this is from an orthopedic spine society manual of Switzerland. I just like the graphics and those exercises. And so I give my patients that as a starting point if they have a pain. So they do, like, they pull the leg down. You can even bring the arms up and pull it up. So they elongate it. So they stretch it a little bit that way. Because it's really hard to just passively stretch a multifidus, So you want to actively stretch it. So if you feel like you actively pull your leg down and pull your arms up, and we can go further into it at some point, but then, you actively sort of stretch this area. They have some really good studies about that. I could talk to you more about Eldoa stretches if you want offline. I could ship you some videos if you're interested. There's no problem at all. And then, there's some mobilization exercise. You tilt your hip up and down, and then you bring the whole pelvis up and down, and then you roll. This is actually strengthening because you can hold on to this, and then you could raise one leg up at a time. And that's some good strengthening balancing thing, for example. And then you could enhance that by laying on a balance pad that's sort of a non-compressible pad, so you have to balance. And again, that's another thing I could talk to you offline. And then you rotate the hips. That's mobilization. Then you do some strengthening. The front muscles. This is one some people have to be careful about, but you can modify it. And so you do the rectus abdominis a little, and then the oblique muscle strengthening. And then here you actually do sort of a modified Superman stretch where you contract these, especially if you feel like your chest goes up and your belly goes down kind of feeling. And then you stretch it out this way. And of course, you can modify that and go onto the side and really stretch one side compared to the other side. So that's what I would do if I had an acute. That's what I do if I have an acute episode.
Thanks.
And yeah, I hope that helps. And that's in that handout. Okay, cool. Sorry, that might have been a little bit too much information. But again, I told you can always stop me, right? So then we go to the intercostals. You have the external intercostal and the internal intercostals. And actually that I like you to show on this picture. I think, oh, that's not the right picture. Never mind. Sorry about that. I got 90 students now. So I'm a little overwhelmed. So if I'm a little behind, you have to be canary in the coal mine and tell me that I forgot about you or something. Let's see. Because if I ask you about the external, internal, intercostal, I'm asking you on these models. And so these models, you can get these pictures from the website. Do you know where to get those? Hello.
I don't know if I know.
Good. Let me show you. Important to know. If you go to module, again, you got the same shell. It's just a different color. I just didn't pull you, so I had my crash. But if you go to module test 2, FI, it should be in there. Pictures, see that?
Yes.
That's the same thing in PDF, so you can just download it and have it and print it out. But you can look; it's PDF, so you can see it on the easily see it on a tablet or so. So when I go to that muscle, internal, external, intercostal, I'm looking for muscles in between these ribs that help me with breathing. And the external intercostals are right here, and the internal intercostals are right here. The job of the external is they're attached on the bottom and then inserted on originated on the bottom, on top, sorry, the bottom part of the top rib, and insert at the top portion of the bottom rib. And when they contract, they pull the ribs upward, and they help basically then make the chest larger by doing so, and that pulls air in passively to the lungs. So that's a breathing muscle. The internal intercostal is actually originating on the top portion of the bottom rib into the lower part of the top rib. And when it contracts, it pulls the ribs down, and it actually lowers and brings the rib cage, makes it smaller and decreases the volume there, so to speak, then. And, that helps in expiration. So when the volume goes down, it's like the air gets puffed out. And so when you think of respiration, you think of it being a passive process. The lungs don't actively inspire, but the muscles move the rib cage around, and the lungs are attached to the rib cage, and then they fill out with air if the rib cage gets bigger, or they let go of the air if the rib cage gets smaller. You get that pressure concept, right?
Yes.
Good. And while we're here, let me just go through the obliques real quick. On this thing, the abdominal obliques, that's a bit further down. You see this model, because I'm going to show it on a module, and you need to know it from these pictures for the test. So you don't, the booklets are explaining and has good pictures to help explain and visualize it. But on the test, I'm going to show it on the model. So if you have that, it's really helpful. So look here. See, on this side, you see bone. On this side, you have a hip, but you also don't see bone. And you also see how this sort of blends in with this wide sheath of tendon, ligament stuff. And then here, it's almost like we go below it a little bit in some ways. I mean, it's taken away. But this is the external abdominal oblique, the outside muscle. And this is a layer deeper. That's the internal abdominal oblique. You can look at the fibers. When I'm in class, in person, I walk around with this thing in front of me, and I show the fibers, and the fibers go this direction. And so this direction is kind of like your whole.
Sorry, can I interrupt really fast?
Oh, absolutely.
Are these photos also in the videos that are on module test 2? Okay.
Yes, these are the same models that I use in the video.
And what you're explaining now is also in the video?
Most likely, yes, I think so.
Okay.
Maybe not all the little detail, but I've been doing this way for a long time. So I think I explain it there. And I also recording this one, so I could put that up too. But the fiber direction is like if you were holding your hand in your pants pocket. So if you visualize this person has pants on, the pant pocket is like opening this way, and you're having your hand go into the pants pocket. That's the same direction that the fibers run. Okay. And on this side, it's the opposite. The fibers go upward. You see that? They don't go downward. That was this direction. And so that's another way where you can identify if it's an external abdominal oblique or an internal abdominal oblique. All right. That might be a little bit too much, but is that sensible? Do you understand it?
That made sense.
Okay, good.
Is that's only with those muscles, or is that like a general rule of like the direction the external ones go down and the internal ones go up?
Well, we don't have too many external and internal muscle groups. We really do. What I can recall right in my head is the abdominals and the intercostals. And if you look at them, that is actually the rule. They do the same thing. The externals go like if you have your pocket up here, it will be also your hand going into the pocket. So you can go by that with those two, at least.
Okay.
Very good question. More integration than I've ever done. All right, excellent. And then the diaphragm is the muscle that's right underneath the rib cage. So we point that out also on that bigger model that I had. I just take the stomach plate off, and then you could see it, and we take all the organs out. That muscle is the main inspiration muscle. So the diaphragm is really the one you want to breathe with. And so if you have a chest breathing thing, you're not getting the same amount of oxygen in your lungs as if you think about it. You've raised these chest things up a little bit, you enhance the volume a little bit. But if you bring this whole damn thing down, you're really having a good breathing inhalation. And so you can practice that by having a book on your belly and you breathe and you see it go up and down. And then you, because we're kind of in society, we're kind of taught not to utilize the belly muscles that much, because then the stomach goes out and that's, seen as being too fat or something. So you really got to rethink that a little bit. So that then brings me to the Linea Alba, and the Linea Alba is, if you see on a stomach, you see this line going up and down. I mean, not like that probably. But you still can feel it. You have a bulgy muscle and then you have a flatty part in the middle. And that's the Linea Alba. That's a tendon sheath that everything attaches to. All these different muscles coming from the side attached to. And we have the external and internal abdominal obliques. These are the pictures here. But then we also have the rectus abdominis, and that's the muscle that's most superficial. That just goes up and down all the way from the pubic bone down in here to the xiphoid process and the top ribs. That's where that's going. And then, so that's that muscle. And then the last one on this sheet we have is the transverse abdominis. And on this lecture, the transverse abdominis is very important. That's the core muscle. And you guys heard about core before?
Yep.
Yep.
Good. So core is like, you want to make your belly be like a Coke can that's full, very strong, not a Coke can that's empty. That's how I think about it. So the transverse abdominis, it goes around and wraps around the stomach content. And if that muscle is strong, it can compress that stomach content and make this piece here, this core part of our body, really firm and not movable like a full Coke can. You can't bend it. If this is wimpy, it's like an empty Coke can. You can move it all over the place. And the problem with that is, if this moves all over the place and you're running, all of this is much more wobbly. And you're using all that joint stuff up by making it more wobbly, because more wobbly means you're moving it more. And so that's why they say a strong core is really crucial to also not have injuries and so forth. And so that's the transverse abdominis. And if you do this exercise and you walk your way back on a ball and forward on a ball, and you do that like 5-6 times, you're going to be sweating. That's a lot of work. That strengthens that transverse abdominis muscle. And of course, we're not a Coke can, but in Coke, we got the bubbles that push out against and make it really strong. And then when they're not there, it's like wimpy as can be. And so that's why I bring that up. Does that help to understand the core thing?
Yeah.
Good.
Yep.
Important. All right. That brings me right along. Again, you interrupt me if you have a question, because I want to just cruise through it. We're going to go to the upper extremity muscles. Now we got muscles that attach the shoulder blade to the trunk. What's those muscles going to be? Those muscles going to be, we're going to have some in the back. We're going to have some in the front. We're going to have, there is one in the front here, the pec minor. There is a few in the back, the levator scapula, the rhomboid muscles. And then there is one big one that comes from underneath the shoulder blade and goes into the ribs. And that's the serratus anterior. And the serratus anterior muscle is right here. That's the first on your list. You see the scapula is reflected, and you see it attached here and then go on to the ribs. That's a very cool muscle. You can see it here. I mean, I'm not a fan of that too much, but it's nice to see the definitions of the muscles. So the word serratus is actually a serrated knife. That's why they called it that word. And so that's that muscle, very important muscle. And so that's the one that sort of glues the shoulder blade to the arm. That's why boxers have a really developed serratus anterior. When they push the fist into somebody else, that shoulder blade need to be firm on the chest. Otherwise, it's just going to fly away. And so that's why that muscle is really crucial for that. So that muscle can be very strong. And then we have the back ones, and then the back we have we talked about it already, the levator scapula, and then we have the rhomboids. and they come from a little further down on the scapula and go into the spine. So that's those in the back, and then in the front we got the pec minor, and the pec minor is attached to the coracoid process here on the shoulder blade, and then it goes into the rib in the front. And it's called a minor because we're gonna have a major laying on top of it, and the major is one of the main muscles that moves the arm around, because you see it lays over it and is attached to the clavicle, the collar, I mean the breast, the chest bone, and then the ribs, sorry about that, and it goes into the arm, the humerus, and it moves the humerus around. It brings it inward in adduction, but also moves it medially. But before we get into, so that's, when we have a minor, we always ask where is the major? So if you have a minor, you have a major. Otherwise, you don't have to say it's minor. Minor means less big, major means bigger. So here's the major and here's the minor. So then, but before we move the arm around, we got to look at the muscles that attach the humerus into the shoulder blade. And those muscles are attached on the shoulder blade, either in the back or the front, and grab the humerus and pull it in. And so when we look, this is where it helps a lot if you know the landmarks of the scapula, because this muscle laying in the supraspinatus fossa is now known as the supraspinatus muscle. The one laying in the infraspinous fossa is known as the infraspinatus muscle. And then in the front, we have a muscle that lays, that's where the ribs attach, almost go on to, that's the front of the scapula. And that's where we have the subscapularis muscle in the subscapular fossa. So there you already got 3 of those muscles taken care of. And these are the supraspinatus, infraspinatus, and subscapularis muscle. Sometimes collectively they call them the sits muscle. And the one I haven't talked about yet is the teres minor. And the teres minor is attached below the infraspinatus onto the side of the scapula and goes again into the, actually these are all going into the greater tubercle in the back or on the outside sort of the humerus. We will have one more muscle coming below that. See this bigger one here. And we talk about that in a minute when we talk about the Latissimus Dorsi muscle. So far, so good?
Yes.
Not too fast?
Not for me.
Good. That's all. Everybody can speak up. And that way we might get through it in due time. So then we're going to get into the muscles that move from there. Then we get into them that move the arm, the humerus around. And we talked about the pec major already in the front, right in here. We also have to touch on, when we talk about the pec major, actually, we should just touch on the coracobrachialis too. The coracobrachialis, any muscle that sort of goes into the arm here, most of them, you're going to find, actually, I think all of them, except, no, not all of them. The deltoid is not, but most of them you find the word brachia in it. Brachia something. If you see brachia something, you're going to look on the humerus area on the arm. So the coracobrachialis muscle is attached to the coracoid process and goes into the shaft of the humerus, and it helps move the arm flexion and adduction. So that kind of helps in some ways a lot. This pec major muscle just supports it here as it attaches a little bit further down. It pulls from a slightly different angle, and so it's a synergist, they call that. And then the one muscle that really helps with moving the arm out, but also has other functions, is the deltoid, because you see the deltoid's attached. If you think about it, the deltoid is attached on the underside of where the trapezius attaches on the top side. So it's attached on the clavicle, the acromion, and then the spine of the scapula. And then what it does, it goes into the deltoid tuberosity on the shaft of the humerus, about mid-shaft. And so its function is clearly bringing the arms out. That's the main function. And as a matter of fact, what's really interesting, and I didn't mention in the Monday class, if you look clinically, frozen shoulder syndromes are often issues with the rotator cuff muscles. So these are the ones on the shoulder blade, And the main one impacted is actually, this is the trapezius. Underneath it is the supraspinatus. And if you look at the supraspinatus, it goes this way from the supraspinous fossa into the greater tubercle on the side. See here, right here. And the problem with the supraspinatus is the outside portion is not well vascularized, so it gets worn out. Vascularized means a lot of blood supply. If it's well vascularized, you have a lot of turnover, and you can protect, the tissue better. If it's not so well vascularized, it wears out, and then it breaks and it gets tears in it. And this is the main muscle that gets hurt in frozen shoulder syndrome, which you might not have heard of it because it kind of happens in 50+ people, not like early on. It's more of a chronic sort of degenerative disease thing. And the thing that's interesting is the deltoid sits on top here, and it goes straight down under the arm. And if you want to bring the arm out, you actually first have to contract the supraspinatus to pull it in a little bit and yank it up about 30 degrees before the deltoid is having an advantage enough that it can pull it up, because since it goes down so steeply that if it were pulling from without help of the supra, it would just yank the arm upward and not outward. And if you can see that clinically with people that this muscle don't work, they can't bring the arm out. They have to take the other arm and sort of pull it out, and then they can raise it after that. And so that's why I brought that up, to help you understand the function of the deltoid a little bit. So I find that quite fascinating. I've seen a couple of those. So that's the deltoid. So main function there is abduction. And then we have, in front, we have the pec major. In the back, we have the latissimus dorsi. And latissimus dorsi is kind of an equivalent. It's just attached on the bottom here all the way down. I mean, it's a big superficial muscle. And you can feel it like, on yourself, actually. You can feel it right here. This is latissimus dorsi when you feel that ripple there on the outside. That's what that is. And you can definitely see it in Michael Phelps. Look at these puppies. He is huge. This is Michael Phelps, and these are the other guys who also won the Olympic gold medal.
And so, looks like a Dorito.
Oh, totally, right? It's crazy. It's like the other thing that's really funny, when you have that much muscle, what the heck are you going to do with that muscle when you don't maintain it? And guess what?
What happens to, does it shrink, or does it like get saggy?
It gets saggy and fatty and bleh. So you got to be careful how much workout you're doing, how buff you get, because you got to maintain some of the buffness. And so that could be tough. When you're young, it just goes up real fast. When you get older, I mean, it's really good because muscle contraction, muscle workouts, the gym rat stuff has a positive with it. And that is when muscle contracts, it secretes a hormone called myokines. And myokines is really a productive hormone helping with blood pressure regulation and with blood sugar, blood glucose regulation, and so forth. So it's really good. And if you're just couch potatoing and couch surfing, after a while, the muscles also secrete a hormone, and that's myostatin. Statin as in static, not kines means moving, kinesio kind of, that word means moving, and statins mean static. And so myostatins enhance the bad crap, enhance the blood glucose retention in the blood, and enhances the blood pressure to go up and so forth. So using muscles and exercising is very, very valuable. And of course, that becomes more crucial as we get older. But we'll all learn that when we get older. And before then, we don't need to worry about any of that. So the latissimus dorsi is the big one. And you see how it kind of catches the shoulder blade here? Guess what? We're going to have another muscle attached to that bottom part of the shoulder blade that reaches into the arm where the latissimus reaches into, which is the same place where the pec major actually reaches into. And that's known as the teres major muscle. So the teres minor is on top, and the teres major is the fatter one on the bottom. Okay, so the bottommost muscle that's attached to the shoulder blade is your teres major. And then from there, we're going to move the elbow. And mainly what we do in the elbow, we go up and down. We go flex, extend. So we got a couple muscles in the front and one muscle in the back. In the front, we got the simply explain, we got the back, on top superficially, we got the biceps brachii. Biceps means two heads, one head here, and that attaches to the outside portion of the shoulder blade and goes into the upper portion of actually the radius to some level anti-ulnar. And then underneath that, we have the brachialis muscle. And the brachialis muscle is sort of attached here on the shaft of the humerus and goes down below into the ulna. And that purely flexes the elbow. The biceps brachii does a couple more synergistic motions and also brings the palm up, as in supination. That means palm up. And you can see that function here, how when this is palm down position, that's why the anatomical position is palm up, because you want to have these bones parallel, not overlaying. And when the biceps move and is attached to the radial tuberosity, and it moves and it brings that radius back out, and it's then parallel. So that's supination. That's where that motion is described. It's a little complicated, but at least there you have a picture of it. And so those two muscles together, the biceps and the brachialis, are in the front flexing the elbow, and in the back we have one muscle that's a massive muscle, and that's the triceps brachii. And triceps means three heads. And so if you think, it's kind of like the two muscles in the front make up the one muscle in the back. They're basically at the end, they're three heads. And so you have to and one goes up to the shoulder blade, the outside portion, kind of on the opposite side where the biceps attaches to, and then the other one's attached to the shaft, and they go all the way into, they all fully, if you touch your olecranon process and you rub this tendon here, that's the triceps tendon right in here. That's what you're feeling right there. And if that tendon is really tight, maybe you got a problem with your elbow joint. That could be. Sometimes that happens because we're always, if we're like that, at some point these wear out a little bit. Anyway, we have then one more muscle that is quite important and interesting, and that's the brachioradialis. And that's actually it looks like it's a forearm muscle, but it attaches on the shaft of the humerus. So therefore, it will be helping flexing the elbow. But it goes all the way down to the styloid process of the radius. And so it also seems to help a little bit with bringing that thumb up. So when you walk or whatever, you hold something and you do this, and you really have to pull up. So we had one example, you do weightlifting like that. These muscles can get overtaxed, and that would be the brachioradialis. That's technically or clinically speaking, it's the tennis elbow that gets developed. When the brachioradialis has a problem with tennis elbow, they call that, even if it's not from tennis. And then we move into the forearm muscle. And the forearm muscles come, from our perspective, in a set of front muscles and back muscles. So on your list, you see pronator teres, flexor on the last column of your list, just underneath triceps. You see pronator teres, flexor carpi radialis, pomoris longus, and flexor carpi ulnaris. You see that?
Yep.
So the front of the arm are those four muscles. So if you see the word flexor in a bird, in the forearm muscles, well, if you see the word flexor, it flexes something. What it flexes depends on where it's at. But in the forearm, it will flex the palm. So these are all forearm muscles because they were going to bring the palm towards the upper arm. They flex it. They then don't straighten it out. The straightening out muscles on the other side. And so here, when we look at these forearm muscles, we look at them right in here. These are the forearm muscles that go into the palm of the hand. They're all more or less attached to the medial epicondyle. And from our purposes, that's what I'm going for. Medial epicondyle. If it goes a little down, and if you have an anatomy book that describes it more detailed, that's okay. But medial epicondyle is a good place, because what you can do, you can study these four muscles by being sort of strategic in some ways. You take your hand and this is a right arm, and you put your palm of the other hand onto the medial epicondyle. That's that bumpy thing that sticks out. So you go like that. And so then what happens is you have a muscle that goes all the way across pretty much, or diagonal, I should say. That's the pronator teres muscle. That muscle, actually, when that pulls, it pulls the radius over the ulna and it brings the palm down. And see, when you put that hand down, that's that first index finger, is the pronator teres muscle, where it lies underneath the finger. or at least more or less. And then the next one next to it is the flexor carpi radialis. And you see the flexor is in the front. Carpi means it goes to the carpal bone. Radialis means it runs on the side of the radius. And the radius is on the side where the thumb is. So that's on the outside of the arm. And so that's the muscle flexor carpi radialis. And see here, we got the middle finger goes towards the thumb. This is the thumb side. It's hard to see, but this is the thumb side, flexor carpi radialis. And then we have a long muscle because it's called palmaris longus, and it goes right into the palm of the hand. And actually about 10% of the people don't have that muscle, but you still have to study it, even if you don't have it.
Wait, why don't you have it? And then can you still move all your fingers if you don't have it?
Yeah, because this muscle doesn't move the fingers. This muscle just kind of, what it does, it sort of pulls on the web of the palm, like superficially pulls on it. And so when you test it, you kind of do a bird beak. I do on patients, and I just have them hold this down, and I kind of see superficially how it moves. When I test the deeper muscle, I have them a fist, and I really try to move the whole thing. And so it's not that essential to have. And so the finger muscles are more, if you take these off and go deeper, you get more into the muscles that go all the way down to the fingers, and you get the digitorum longus and the digitorum brevis muscles there. You have, like, in the palm of the hand, you got like 3 layers of muscles. It's like that many little detailed muscles. But, you know, they have all these different names. We don't talk about them here. But it will be explainable of what they do, and then it will make sense why we have those many. So you don't worry about it. But that's why we can have that muscle missing, but it's not that bad. And then, although I should ask somebody who doesn't have it, because you know you have it. You know you have it if you go like that and you have a tendon that sticks up above this thing going. You know, if you have a tendon that goes into, that's the palmaris longus, that tendon sticking up, that's the one. And so if you have that thing, you know you have it.
That's cool.
Isn't that kind of cool? I know. Well, it's got to be relevant, you know. And then the last one here is an outside muscle. So, well, actually inside, medial, I should say. And that goes to the wrist on this side, and that's the pinky side, and that's the ulnaris, the ulna side. And so therefore it's called flexor carpi ulnaris. And so when we actually look at the first letter of these 4 muscles right here, we can say PFPF. And believe me, even though it's very silly, that helped me remember them when I first learned them. And I still reach back to that. If I have to remember any of that, I go back to those mnemonics. So that's the flexor side, the front side, and then flexor from the front, and then we go and have some in the back. And in the back, you know, when you think about the front's way more strong, right? You have to do this motion with the front. Everything you hold up is the front. The back is like bringing the hands up and extending the fingers. That's like, you know, you're not going to hold a garbage bag this way or a grocery bag. I mean, you can. That's probably a good exercise, but, you know, most of us probably won't. So, and so those muscles are less strong and they're less bulky. They kind of start more or less on the lateral epicondyle of the humerus. And again, look at that. When you see the word extensor, you know it's on that side, on the back side of the forearm. Well, extensor carpis, if they're related to the forearm, you know, the motion is extension. And so the extensor carpi ulnaris is, I guess, one, you know, that goes to the pinky. Extensor carpi radialis is a one that goes to the thumb area. And these are sort of regional, you know, because on the modules, there's a lot of muscles. You even see here, you got this and then you got this. This actually technically is a thumb muscle. And then this is the extensor carpi radialis. But whatever I tag here, if you look at the back side, I got 3 areas to tag. One is by the thumb, one is in the middle, one is by the pinky. Those are my 3 choices. And that's how we do it in this section of the class. That way you don't have to be too concerned about too many details. And the one in the middle is the digitorum, extensor digitorum. And you see all the tendon go all the way to the digits. And so we got an extension digitorum in the back, and we will have one in the front too. It's just it's a deeper muscle, so that's why it's not on the list, and we don't really study it. But if you, depending on where you go, you know, that's then the next layer. All right, good. How is that go? How is that?
I found it all very interesting.
Well, that makes me happy. I tried to make these integrate. You know, it's interesting. We've since this is a year ago since we started doing the Zoom stuff. And it's kind of been evolving, and I think this semester I finally kind of get how to do it. So, any tips, please? I'm just a year young in understanding this online thing. So with that, if you're good, give me about maybe 10 minutes more if you can, or hopefully a little less. But let's take a sheet of paper, and I want to do a little quiz. Can we do that?
Yep.
All right, sheet of paper. And your term list. And 3, 2, 1. Come on, give me the picture I want. There it is. I want you to tell me, number 1, and write it down. Don't say it yet. What's this landmark called here? Number 1, landmark. And again, a landmark is a part of the bone. It's not the whole bone. That would be a bone. A landmark is a piece of it. Number 2, what's the bump of the back of the head? And we learned today the trapezius goes into that thing. Number 3, and you stop me if I go too fast, but that way we get out of here faster. What's the cheekbone called? Number 3. The cheekbone, number 3. One, between the eyebrows. 2, bump at the back of the head. 3, cheekbone. 4, when you take the cap off, the skull cap off, on the inside, you got that big hole, the foramen magnum, and then in the front of that, you have that indentation. That is where the pituitary gland sits in. That's number 4. Number 5 is a muscle that we have on the face. And it's not a chewing muscle, but it's one that's underneath the chewing muscle that goes backwards on the side of the mouth. Not the superficial one that's like a little sliver, the one that's deeper. That's very well developed in nursing babies. Helps with the, also is the one that helps make the dimples. Number 5. Number 6 is a round muscle around the eye. That's number 6. Round muscle around the eye. Number 7. We have this round structure. That's the first vertebra. Then we have the second cervical vertebra, and there's a thing sticking up. And I want you to tell me, what's that landmark called? Number 7. Landmark. Good. Oh, before I forget, can somebody remind me about the reviews? You guys should evaluate me, I heard. And I want to make sure that the evaluations are up on Zoom, but I can't, on the canvas, but I can't see it. Does anybody see that?
They're on, they are there.
Okay, can you make sure, please, to fill those out? And you can say whatever you want. I can't see it. I just get the rundown and then can go cry under my pillow. All right, anyway, number 8. So number 7 was this. Sorry about that, I just remembered. Number 8 is when you look at the humerus, we got this bump here on the elbow side, the distal side, and this is where all those flexor muscles more or less attach. What's that called on the bony part? What's that called? We just talked about it a little bit when you got to the muscles. So that's number 8. Number 8. The inside bump on the arm bone at the elbow. There you go. Number 9 is when I look at the hip bone, I have this round, fairly deep fossa. What's that called? Number 9. What's that called? Number 9. No, numero 9. Is that number 10? Number 10 is the next muscle. Look at the front of the neck. Going up and down. What's this muscle called? It's named by its attachments to the bone. And you can use shorthand on that if you want. So you don't have to write so much. Number 10. Number 10. And number 11 is right on this puppy too. See, it's the one that goes up and down on the stomach. Goes up and down on the stomach. That's number 11. And then number 12 is also on this thing. It's the one on this side that goes not in the direction of how you put your hand in a pocket. That's number 12. It's a muscle on the stomach that is the opposite direction of how you put the hand in a pocket. That's the arrangement of the fibers. That should give you a hint. So that's 10, 11, 12, 13. On the arm, this is the outside arm part on the shoulder. What's that muscle called? Number 13. And then number 14 is also there. It's the one that lays right here on top of the spine of the scapula. Number 14. That's it. Good job. All right, I know I'm going over a little bit, so let's just go right to it and figure out what it is. I want to hear as many sound and noise as I can hear. So everybody, what is number 1?
Glabella.
Anybody else? Oh, you guys, come on.
Sorry, you're cutting out on mine. I couldn't hear you cut out on my computer.
Oh, okay, that's all right. But I want to hear many, because see, if you say it, you learn it. So number 1 was glabella. And number 2 is what?
EOP.
EOP.
EOP, good job. Number 3?
Zygomatic.
Zygomatic. Good, as many voices as I can get. Number 4?
Celaturcia.
Celaturcica. Good job. That's a hard one to pronounce. I'm really glad you're brave. Now, number 5.
Buccinator?
It's the buccinator, right. And the rosarius is on top. That little sliver is the rosarius, and the buccinator is deep inside. And then number 6.
Orbicular oculi.
Orbicularis oculi. Good. Everybody, come on, guys. I got 10 people here. That's a small class, huh? Number 7.
Dens.
There you go. The dens. Number 8.
Medial epicondyle.
Lateral epicondyle.
It's the medial. So you can see it's bumpier. And you can actually feel that it's bumpier on yourself. But also the medial side is the side that is on towards the scapula. Okay?
Oh, I always get confused with the anatomical position is like hand up. Yeah.
I know. And that plays really a big part in the forearm. So the anatomical position is palm forward. And so then those bones are parallel to one another. And right above that bone, that's where that medial epicondyle is. And so yeah, and the lateral is by the radius where that round thing is. You see the forearm bones are a little different. So there's a couple of ways to memorize it. One is if it's in an articulated, so you see it with the scapula, you know it's towards the scapula. That's medial. The other side is lateral. The other thing you can notice is that is a round bone. That's the radius, and that's on the outside. And the other bone, that's kind of different. That's on the inside, so that's also medial.
Round, cool.
I know, right? And I've looked at those things so many hours that these things just pop into my head sometimes. It's like, so it's like, if you don't catch it the first time around, that's why I need you to be allow yourself to not always get it right, but still be, do it, because it's just learning a new language. I mean, that's what it is. Never mind. Number 9. What's number 9?
Acetabulum.
Acetabulum. Good job. That's the right one. And then number 10, we go to the bone, the muscles, and we have oopsies. Come on. That one going up and down.
Sternocleidomastoid.
Sternocleidomastoid. Good job, you guys. And on the test, you even are allowed to say SCM, and I take it, because that's a common abbreviation of that muscle, because everybody's tired of saying the whole thing the whole time, and then what about the one going up and down?
Rectus abdominis.
Rectus abdominis. Good job. And what about the other one on the side going up and down this way? Opposite.
Internal oblique.
Good. Good. The internal oblique. The external is on this side. See, the fibers go this way. So that's the hand going in the pocket. This side, the fibers don't go that way. And then we have number 13.
Deltoid.
Good. Deltoid. And number 14.
Supraspinatus.
Supraspinatus. Very good. That's very good. All right. Well, you two did good. Very good. I miss a little bit more sound in the background, but I'm hopefully going to get that next time. All right. As we get more and more confident about these terms, but it's good to listen to them, and it's also good to speak them out. All right. So with that, I'm going to take roll. And if you have any questions, let me just interrupt me, and we can answer those in between. Okay. Jamuna.
Yes, sir.
Tanaya.
Here.
Lexi. Oh, Lexi left. Nelia.
Here.
Sarah.
Here.
Koa.
Here.
Kayla May.
Here.
Vannery.
Here.
Evan left. Brianna.
Here.
Caitlin.
Here.
Did I miss anybody? I don't think so, right? Good.
I came in a little late to the class, but I'm here.
Oh, yes, there you are, Berenice. Sorry about that. I
It's okay.
got you multiple times when I went back and forth. Okay, I got you. Good. Anybody else? Any questions? Any comments? You guys doing all right with the posture and with the work thing? And are you getting into the injury prevention thing yet?
I'm gonna start looking at that this week.
Good. Yeah, have some
Injury
fun.
prevent.
Yeah, on the health kit thing, I got one that's the home ergonomics, right? And then I got the posture, and then I got one more, and that's the injury prevention. And there's a little pamphlet on the inside. And I made that. No, I made the work ergonomics for the faculty at Merit. This one I took seminars for chiro stuff to evaluate patients for preventing injuries. And these are all orthopedic tests that have normative data, that if you do like squats and you're wimpy with the squats, you're vulnerable to get injured if you do like a weekend barrier type stuff, sporty stuff. And so I figured I wanted to do it for my patients, or my students, but not make it so complicated. And so I made that brochure or that pamphlet to explain it simply, but still you go through the orthopedic process. And these are like my mom is in Zurich in Switzerland, and she went to the orthopedic group doctors that takes care of the Swiss Olympic team, and they did the same stuff with them. And so this is some cool stuff. And I figured that way, I was trying to figure it in a way that I can share it, that, you don't have to go to a doctor to do it. And so that's one of the exercises that might take you a little bit of time to do it, because you got to do squats, you got to do side bridges and hold it and go through it and come up with questions if you have any concern or any questions. And obviously, if you do anything like that and it hurts you, don't worry about it. Just stop it and talk to me, or, don't do that part of the exercise. Okay. But read through it. Have some fun with it. Break it up. Good. And also, you know, if you get too bored of studying, break it up and have a TED Talk. Have you tried some of those? Some of those are all my favorites on these booklets. I've all vetted them as my best ones that I think for the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years.
They look really cool. Like the sleep is your secret power and stuff. I'm like, I want to watch it sometime. Yes.
Yeah, and I did, you know, when I first started studying, starting to teach, figure out how to teach, actually, some of them I have in there that like the Ken Robinson or so, I really learned so much from listening to like that Ken Robinson is on this guy, on this little pamphlet. And it's just, it's actually very brilliant because it's really down to earth. A lot of that stuff that comes through those talks.
Yeah, it looks really great.
Yeah. Cool. Well, with that, if nothing else is left, we'll close it out. Thank you so much for all that attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good
Bye.
night.
Thank you. Good night. Shoot
Good
me a text
night.
if you have a question. Bye.
Bye.
I really liked the I liked the talking about the muscles from the levator scapula, because I play violin and I
Oh, that's
sort of play
right.
professionally. So like I'm always thinking this is the muscle that is painful for me. I'm always like wondering what muscle it is. So this was a cool lecture for me.
Oh, cool. And it's probably the levator too, you know, if you hold it up.
Oh, levator. Yeah.
That's a big one. I mean, and if you get stiffness, you still play the violin a lot?
Yeah, I play in the San Jose Symphony and the
Oh, wonderful.
other symphonies around. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. That's kind of weird with COVID, huh?
Weird with COVID. Yeah, it's just, well, ours particularly is not doing anything, but yeah, it's weird. And it's like reduced orchestras with masks, but with breaks, you know, like of a certain amount of time so the air gets out of the building. There's nothing much happening. But,
that's crazy. Yeah. You got to shoot me a YouTube of some of your performance. I'd love to listen to some of that, please.
Sure, yeah.
If you could shoot me a text with someone. You got my text, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, the other thing, if you really stiffy right where the angle is, you know, right where the shoulder blade comes in, where at the end of the spine, and that's that levator underneath, and you can really do a lot of good if you take like some kind of a ball or a roller and really rub there, you know, and massage the attachment to the bone. That really helps a lot.
Yeah, I've been doing that, and I'm just like wondering, like, how can I get rid of this thing? But I think it's just a thing that you're gonna have when you play violin. You know, it's just gonna be stiff there.
I mean, I'm definitely, you know, happy to share certain tricks that I've learned. I mean, because there is more newer ways of looking at muscle work that's not just releasing tension in muscles, that also looks at how do the muscle brain connection work and how do they function and how do they contract and react to the contraction, and I've had incredible results with doing some of that work with athletes, where it's like, oh, like a football player had his calf, he couldn't see, and then after an hour, he's like, oh, look, I can see my calf again. It's like, what the heck? You know, and it's really crazy stuff. And I'm happy to share with you body worker or something if you're interested in something like that, because I do believe you can get probably a lot more life out of that area than because if you think about holding the violin on like that, it's injury, it's chronic injury. You know, it's a chronic injury, a wearing out thing, and bringing some life in. And so one of the parts of those techniques is to stimulate the attachment to the bone. And so just simply by doing that, you can get help. And if you're inclined massage wise, I'm very happy to show you some of these points to, you know, reflex. I
would love that. Any kind of pamphlets or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have somebody that you work with?
I was having more like chiropractic adjustment, but that wasn't really like body work per se, like massage, you know.
Yeah. That's more cracky stuff. Do they work on the ribs or just the neck, the spine?
It was a lot of spine, and then up into the neck. Like it's actually across the street from your office. It's
Oh, that's who is it?
yeah, Karen. Gosh, I stopped going because of COVID, but
Yeah. But yeah, so we can brainstorm through the semester and sort of think about things, and I can pull up some stuff that I can think of, because you know, if you're inclined yourself or you have a friend or so that can do some of that too. I don't know.
yeah.
You know, you need somebody with some decent feeling hands kind of thing. And then there's a lot that you can take out of that. And I'm happy to guide you guys a little bit. You know.
That would be great. Yeah, maybe we can talk more about it at some point. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Just reach out. I'm totally, you know, I'm very happy, and you know, I want to share these things as much as I can. It's
No, it's
not about
great.
holding the knowledge in, you know, it's really about trying to make life better. Because you know, yeah, but you got to send me a YouTube of something.
Okay.
And then it reminds me to figure out what to do about it.
Okay.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right. Thank you
Have a
so
good
much.
one. Take care.
You too. Bye.
You're here, Evan, huh? After all. Or not, huh?